As the extended Special Public Works program commences nationwide in seeming defiance of the House of Reps resolution to halt its commencement, we find out what will be the fate of the 774,000 unemployed Nigerians who are participating. And uncertainty trails increase in electricity tariff reportedly approved by the National Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC. Has an approval been given or not? Is it 50%, 100% increase, or what exactly is going on in the power sector? Well, we'll take a thorough look at it tonight. Hello and welcome. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I am Kayode Okikelu. Power, they say, is transient, meaning it lasts only for a short time. The context of this saying, by the way, is in terms of political power. But it would appear the power sector in Nigeria has taken that saying as its own mantra, which clearly should not be. Electricity supply in the country today leaves so much to be desired. In fact, some Nigerians believe if you can solve the problem of power in Nigeria, then you will have solved about half of the nation's challenges. So when you have a seemingly everlasting problem of poor power supply and you add to it tariff increase, you will definitely get a major backlash. And that is what the National Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, is receiving as we speak, with reports emerging earlier today of an increase in the tariffs. Section of the media reported a more than 50% hike in electricity tariffs, citing the December 2020 minor review of the multi-year tariff order and minimum remittance order. But in response, NERC says it didn't approve such, accusing the media of misinforming Nigerians. Now, here's part of a statement which the Commission released today. Take a look. The Commission hereby states unequivocally that no approval has been granted for a 50% tariff increase in the tariff order for electricity distribution companies, which took effect on January the 1st, 2021. Goes on to say, in compliance with the provisions of the EPSR Act and the nation's tariff methodology for biennial minor review, the rates for service bands A, B, C, D, and E have been adjusted by 2 naira to 4 naira per kilowatt hour to reflect the partial impact of inflation and movement in Forex. But clearly, reading this does not quite clear the air for a lot of Nigerians. In fact, it further confuses them. How? Well, does this mean NERC did not approve the increase which it says took effect on January the 1st? If you take a look at that statement again, you see that line that speaks about January the 1st, or there's no increase at all. That's on the one hand. And when the Commission says the rates for service bands A, B, C, D, and E have been adjusted by 2 naira to 4 naira, which you can see that's second to the last line, per kilowatt hour to reflect the partial impact of inflation and movement in Forex, you begin to ask, isn't that an increase as well? So clearly the Commission needs to clear the air on this in simpler terms, because if we can't have steady power supply just yet, the least we can get is some clarification. So while we wait, let's get into our big story tonight. It's the extended Special Public Works program approved by the President to engage 1,000 unemployed Nigerians across the 774 local government areas in the country. Well, they are to be engaged in a couple of works, and here's a list: road maintenance, traffic control, street cleaning, drainage digging and clearance, irrigation canals clearance, cleaning of public infrastructure like health centers, schools, and the likes. And the plan really is to pay them a stipend of 20,000 naira monthly. It sounds straightforward, right? But if there's anything we have learned from this program, from conception till date, it is nothing close to straightforward. And to buttress that point, take a look at this exchange which happened last year at the National Assembly.
8 ministries to handle this. We will have divided it 1 billion or 500 million to all the ministries.
We are not saying 8 ministries are supervising this project. We said by the directive of Mr. President, in order to plan for it, 8 ministries came together and brought recommendations which I accepted.
How are you going to measure the success of this program? Because you never said anything about it. And you are the one executing and doing everything. How do we now know that that money is going to be utilized properly?
Executive session.
I please respectfully, and I say this respectfully, say this, that I will want the cameras to be here. It's a matter of public interest.
Okay, no problem. Let the cameras be
I
here.
allow the cameras to go out.
Okay,
I want the cameras to go out because I will not talk. I will not speak.
Chairman, you can't guide our proceedings here. You are not supposed to guide our proceedings here. If you don't want, you can go out.
From this side, I want to move. I don't know to apologize to this city.
What am I apologizing for? You said I should apologize for saying that we should do our hearing before the Nigerian people, for insisting that we should do the hearing before the Nigerian people. If you allow me to go, I'll go. You cannot say something and disallow me the opportunity to respond. It's wrong. It's wrong.
Honorable Minister, for your information, nobody has anything to hide. You want to run a program without key performance indicators? Without proper...
I am here to answer it. I'm here to answer it. I'm here to answer it. You cannot intimidate me.
So that was the Minister of State for Labour and Employment, Festus Keyamo, SAN, in an altercation with members of the National Assembly's Joint Committee on Employment and Labour over the Special Public Works Programme. Well, the frosty relationship between Mr. Keyamo and the National Assembly, of course, saw the commencement of the Special Works Programme drag for months. It was billed for flag-off on October the 1st, and it was postponed to November the 1st, and finally, January the 5th was agreed on. That's today. But does that mean the coast is clear? Don't forget, the House resolved just late last year to mandate the Minister of State for Labour to stay the implementation. So does that mean they are in on this too? And don't forget questions about the selection process and just how the program will run. So tonight, we seek to get answers to these questions and more from the man who's sort of driving this initiative. We have joining us on the program, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Festus Keyamo, Minister of State for Labour and Employment. Good evening and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, just before we get into the issue around the Special Public Works Program, let me get your thoughts on one of our lead stories. And, a lot of Nigerians are still, debating the reported increase in tariff for electricity. I know you were part of the negotiations that took place last year. Labour, federal government, we had discos also, and consumers consulted in that process. So from the consultations, negotiations, and the resolutions, are discos allowed to increase tariffs anytime soon?
Well, thank you. I saw that story myself this morning. I'm the chairman of the subcommittee consisting of federal government side and Labour that has been mandated to go around the country and actually interact with stakeholders, consult stakeholders, and the discos to find an acceptable tariff, cost-reflective tariff that should be paid by Nigerians. We are still in the process of carrying out our assignments. We have not finished. And when I saw the story this morning, I consulted members of the team, and they said it's not correct. There has been no increase in tariff. What we agreed to do was to freeze certain bands. We have band A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. And so we adjusted. In the interim, what we did was to adjust certain bands and to ensure that certain persons who are supposed to be on some band are not wrongly put on some other bands. So what has just been done is adjustment of certain bands, but there has not been any increase in tariffs.
Well, looking at that statement from NERC, which talks about the adjustment, says the rate. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing double voices, so you need to sort out, and it doesn't make me speak well.
Okay, apologies for that. We'll try to resolve that. How is it now?
Reduce one of the volumes.
Okay, well, we'll work on that. But let me quickly refer to the statement released by NERC, just so you can help Nigerians understand what exactly is going on. Because if you go on social media and off social media, you see the confusion. And NERC said that in compliance with the provision of the EPSR Act and the nation's tariff methodology for biennial minor review, the rates for service bands A, B, C, D, and E have been adjusted by 2 naira to 4 naira per kilowatt hour. I mean, it's simple math. 2 to 4, that's an increase, isn't it? So what does adjustment mean, if you can help Nigerians understand?
Well, thank you so much. Like I said, we immediately called for a meeting on this issue, and what NEC has released does not reflect what we agreed upon at the level of the committee. So I can say I was not consulted. Members of the committee, they were not consulted. And we just spoke this evening. What I just said earlier was the actual position of the committee. What NEC has released now is not actually reflective of what we decided at the committee level. So we have I think we're trying to fix a meeting for Thursday to find out exactly what happened and then to take it from there. But I can assure you that we'll soon come out with a statement before Nigerians to show the true position of things. But what we did at the committee level was not to increase the tariff, but to adjust certain tariffs from one band to the other. We removed certain tariffs from one band and then, used it to cushion some other bands.
So let's talk about a major issue tonight, and that's this special public works program, which, I mean, you have spearheaded in some sense. It was meant to begin last year. It was postponed and eventually postponed to January the 5th, which is today. So the question is, has it commenced officially? In what states did it commence, and what jobs did they do today?
Thank you very much. We have commenced substantially in all parts of the country. There were a few states that reported that they could not commence immediately because of issues of logistics. And so we gave them the freedom to commence maybe tomorrow or next. And so we will have a few of them commencing tomorrow, next, and perhaps latest Friday. But this week is the general takeoff of the program nationwide. So we played earlier on the altercation you had with members of the National Assembly in the build-up to this. Just late last year, the House of Reps actually resolved to ask you to halt the whole process and maybe start on another date. Have you resolved that with the House of Reps? Are they in on this commencement also? No, I think maybe you did not properly read the resolution, I think, of the House, not of the Senate. What they were doing was that I think they were urging Mr. President. I think what we have tried to do in the last few months was to properly situate where this separation of powers is in terms of making laws, oversighting, and then execution of programs. They were urging Mr. President, look at the resolution very well. They cannot actually mandate. They were urging Mr. President to see whether they could halt the commencement of the program. But Mr. President had actually directed that we commence the program. It is only Mr. President that can actually say that we should stop the implementation of the program. So on the directive of Mr. President, we actually commenced the program. They didn't just resolve to mandate you to stay action. They also talked about the Minister of Finance to halt any disbursement in that area. So clearly, they weren't just speaking to the president. They were speaking to members of the president's cabinet. So just before we go on break, can you help us understand, is the relationship between you and the House of Representatives on this regard, is it still frosty or everything is sorted now? I don't think there's any problem, really. We have all, realized at the end of the day that we need to work for the interests of Nigerians. These are very honorable members. They also mean well for Nigerians, the National Assembly. And I think at the end of the day, I think the misunderstanding earlier was just the issue of the separation of powers. Who should implement a program, who should not implement a program. Once a budget is passed, the powers of the National Assembly stops when they pass a budget. If you don't want a program to be done, then don't pass the budget. But once you pass a budget, the program has been properly budgeted for. At that point, it moves to the executive. Well, they can oversight, they can ask questions, they can investigate, but at the end of the day, the execution lies within the powers of Mr. President. And we as ministers, all of us as ministers, when
I would ask you to hold your thoughts for a moment.
We're exercising executive powers.
Right. I'll ask you to hold your thoughts for a moment, if you will. We're due for a break now. But when we return, there are a lot of other questions. The implementation, what happens next, and some other thorny issues which have played out and which a lot of Nigerians will want you to answer tonight. So please stay with us. You're welcome back to the program. Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Festus Keyamo, the Honorable Minister of State for Labor and Employment, is still with us on the program, and we're discussing the 774,000 jobs, as you know, as it is known, but in fact, it's an extended special public works program of this government. So thank you for staying with us on the program. In that altercation, which we saw earlier on the program, which clearly showed that, I mean, the relationship between you and the House of Representatives, in fact, the National Assembly at that point was frosty. You kept talking about exposing corruption, and you said that you needed the cameras there to expose corruption. The question will be, have you been able to expose that corruption which you thought needed to be exposed?
Well, I don't think really that we should dwell on the past. You know, that has been done, is past, and I think we are going ahead with the implementation of the program. I think you also got that wrong. The context in which that was said was that they said they wanted to see me in camera, close the doors because they wanted to investigate in order to expose corruption. And I said, you don't close the doors. You don't close the doors when you want to expose corruption. Open the doors so that whatever corruption we want to talk about, we should talk about it in public. But that is, like I said, we should not dwell in the past and the negatives. Those were times where we misunderstood ourselves regarding, you know, the separation of powers and how much we should cooperate. My feeling has always been that there should be major cooperation between both arms of government. I've always felt that. But we should also cooperate within the context of separation of powers. So, for instance, when the budget is about to be passed and the powers is within the National Assembly, the executive must lobby the legislature. That is what it's all about. But then, after having passed the budget and the powers of execution is now within the executive, then the legislature should lobby the executive. That is the proper context of, you know, checks and balance and separation of powers. You cannot, for example, I cannot lobby you when you are passing the budget and then lobby you to execute my program when it is within my powers to execute my program. No, there should be balance between both, you know, arms of government. And I think going forward, I think we understood ourselves better.
Okay, if you say that the relationship has been repaired, then we'll take your word at that. But talking about cooperation, you mentioned specifically that about 10 to 15% of those jobs are reserved for the lawmakers. You spoke right after that altercation, and that's about 116,000 of the 774,000 jobs. And the question will be, how does that work? So will they be a part of the selection process? And why did you have to do that?
Well, because when we sat, there's a board of the NDA. The NDA has a board. I'm also the chairman of the board of the NDA. And there was also a committee set up, an interministerial committee that was set up as instructed by Mr. President to work out the modalities for execution. Of course, the NDA was to execute and as supervised by myself, the supervising minister, not just as instructed by Mr. President to supervise, but by law, by the NDA, the minister is an integral part of the NDA. So when some people were struggling to separate the minister for the NDA, I was just laughing. By law, the minister in the act, the DG reports to him on a day-to-day basis. He's also chairman of the board. So it is a fruitless exercise to try to separate the minister by force from the NDA. It's impossible. So at the end of the day, when we sat, we took a decision and said, look, the way to go about this was to ensure that, look we put the selection process in the hands of local people, because the target audience in this case, the people who are to participate, the target participants, I mean, are people who don't have access to internet. They are the laborers, itinerant workers, who may not have access to computers. This is the largest, kind of program, social intervention program in the history of Nigeria that targets laborers, the poor of the very poor, and those who are the very bottom of the hierarchy of workers in Nigeria. So we thought that, look, and again, if you do it by internet, people, because it has to be 1,000 persons per local government. So you have to be sure that those 1,000 persons are ordinarily resident in those local governments. So if you do it by way of, online application, somebody can be applying from Akwa Ibom, staying in Akwa Ibom, and applying online and claiming Sokoto, a local government in Sokoto and all that. How would you know if it comes online, the application comes online? So we wanted to ensure that local leaders who know these people, who are there, can confirm that these people are from these local governments or they stay in those local governments to carry out the community services that we earmarked for this program. And so what did we do? We now said, look, instead of handing it over to politicians to say, go and give to your supporters, we brought in a multi-sectoral approach. The chairman of Christian Association of Nigeria of the state was there, chairman of the Muslim body at the state was there, civil society organizations, a part of the selection committee, head of the market woman, part of the selection committee, and on like that. A multi-sectoral approach so that churches will contribute, National Union of Road Transport Workers will contribute, on like that.
Mr. Keyamo,
that is the
which is why I asked,
different states.
Which is why I asked specifically.
If you look at section 16.
Just a moment. Which is why I asked specifically.
It is the exclusive right.
Mr. Keyamo, pardon me. Which is why I asked specifically how the 10%. Right, which is why I asked specifically how the 10% to 15% allocated to the lawmakers would be done. Will they be a part of the selection process, or were they a part of that selection process? I was trying to get answers to that, because looking at the constitution of the state committees, I don't see the lawmakers as part of that committee. But add to that this question. What happens, just a moment, if we could just take this together because of our time, what happens then after the 3 months? Because I understand this is meant to last for about 3 months. So what happens afterwards?
Okay, there are two-pronged questions. The first one is whether certain persons or how many persons contributed to the selection committee. The membership of the selection committee is irrelevant. It is the mandate given to them and the sectors they are mandated to pick people from that are important. So, for example, we consider the fact that if each member, in fact, that was even the first recommendation of the committee. In a state, for example, you may have up to 13 members of the House of Rep, and you may have, 3 senators. So if each of them brought 1-1, and we said, look, the selection committee will be 20 members in each state. So if each of them brought 1-1, you will see that we already had 16 members already in a selection committee, or at times 13. If the members of the House of Rep are maybe 10, you will now have 13 members. And so 7 will now be left for other sectors of the economy. And we felt, no, that would be too unwieldy, because that would mean that a particular arm of government or sector of the committee, section of Nigeria, the political section, has taken most of the selection process. So we now said, look, the membership is irrelevant. It is the allocation that is more important than the membership. For example, if you even have only 1 representative in the selection committee, but you are giving 300 per local government, that's the number you are given to produce is far more important than the number you nominated in the selection committee. So we try to satisfy everybody. And so the governors got their own because they are Nigerians too. And the most distinguished and respected members also got their own because they are Nigerians also. But then we also made sure that for ordinary Nigerians, we reserved a majority part of it, a very major part of it for ordinary Nigerians too, who have no access to political leaders. That was the point we were trying to make. Many Nigerians have no access to political leaders, and they also have a right to participate in such a program.
Right. As we wind down, Honorable Minister, since we started by speaking about the powers of the National Assembly. I was talking about the exit strategy. I wanted to talk about the exit strategy. Okay, please land on that.
The exit strategy is that we have so many recommendations on proposals on our table. Certain persons have said, look, they want to even engage them, private sector, engage them after the 3 months since we have a database of these members already, so they will tap into that database and engage them in some private work. Government is also thinking of some very big agricultural programs that they can migrate to. These people can migrate to. And then, of course, Mr. President, if he's very satisfied with the execution of the program, it can be an annual event or he may extend the period of the program. But these are options that are open before us. But let me tell you the greatest exit that we even have. Many people who will be empowered with 60,000 naira at the grassroots level to cushion the effect of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. 60,000 naira can do a lot to small businesses, small traders, market women who will plough this money back into their businesses and the business will grow.
Well, Honorable Minister of State for Labor and Employment, Mr. Festus Keyamo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, I would like to thank you so much for your thoughts on the program, and we definitely wish you the very best with the program.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Coyote Okikiolu.